Imagination, the real and eternal world, of which this vegetable universe is but a faint shadow. What is the life of man but art and science? Imagination is more important than knowledge. Chapter 1. Who is your imagination? I rest not from my great task to open the eternal world, to open the immortal eyes of man inwards into the worlds of thought, into eternity, ever expanding in the bosom of God. The human imagination. Certain words in the course of long use gather so many strange connotations that they almost cease to mean anything at all. Such a word is imagination. This word is made to serve all manner of ideas, some of them directly opposed to one another. Fancy, thought, hallucination, suspicion. Indeed, so wide is its use and so varied its meaning, the word imagination has no status nor fixed significance. For example, we ask a man to use his imagination, meaning that his present outlook is too restricted and therefore not equal to the task. In the next breath, we tell him that his ideas are pure imagination, thereby implying that his ideas are unsound. We speak of a jealous or suspicious person as a victim of his own imagination, meaning that his thoughts are untrue. A minute later, we pay a man the highest tribute by describing him as a man of imagination. Thus, the word imagination has no definite meaning. Even the dictionary gives us no help. It defines imagination as 1, the picturing power or act of the mind, the constructive or creative principle. 2, a phantasm. 3, an irrational notion or belief. 4, planning, plotting or scheming as involving mental construction. I identify the central figure of the Gospels with human imagination, the power which makes the forgiveness of sins, the achievement of our goals, inevitable. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. There is only one thing in the world, imagination, and all our deformations of it. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Imagination is the very gateway of reality. Man, said Blake, is either the ark of God or a phantom of the earth and of the water. Naturally, he is only a natural organ, subject to sense. The eternal body of man is the imagination. That is God himself, the divine body, Jesus. We are his members. I know of no greater and truer definition of the imagination than that of Blake. By imagination, we have the power to be anything we desire to be. Through imagination, we disarm and transform the violence of the world. Our most intimate, as well as our most casual relationships become imaginative as we awaken to the mystery hid from the ages that Christ in us is our imagination. We then realize that only as we live by imagination can we truly be said to live at all. I want this book to be the simplest, clearest, frankest work. I have the power to make it. That I may encourage you to function imaginatively. That you may open your immortal eyes inward into the worlds of thought, where you behold every desire of your heart as ripe grain white or ready to harvest. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. The abundant life that Christ promised us is ours to experience now, but not until we have the sense of Christ as our imagination can we experience it. The mystery hid from the ages. Christ in you, the hope of glory. is your imagination. This is the mystery which I am ever striving to realize more keenly myself and to urge upon others. Imagination is our Redeemer, the Lord from heaven, born of man, but not begotten of man. Every man is Mary, and birth to Christ must give. If the story of the Immaculate Conception and birth of Christ appears irrational to man, it is only because it is misread as biography, history, and cosmology, and the modern explorers of the imagination do not help by calling it the unconscious or subconscious mind. Imagination's birth and growth is the gradual transition from a God of tradition to a God of experience. If the birth of Christ in man seems slow, it is only because man is unwilling to let go the comfortable but false anchorage of tradition. When imagination is discovered as the first principle of religion, the stone of literal understanding will have felt the rod of Moses and, like the rock of Zion, issue forth the water of psychological meaning to quench the thirst of humanity. And all who take the proffered cup and live alike, according to this truth, will transform the water of psychological meaning into the wine of forgiveness. Then, like the Good Samaritan, they will pour it on the wounds of all. The Son of God is not to be found in history, nor in any external form. He can only be found as the imagination of Him in whom His presence becomes manifest. Oh, would thy heart but be a manger for His birth. God would once more become a child on earth. Man is the garden in which this only begotten Son of God sleeps. He awakens this Son by lifting His imagination up to heaven and clothing men in godlike stature. He must go on imagining better than the best we know. Man, in the moment of his awakening to the imaginative life, must meet the test of sonship. Father, reveal thy Son in me. And it pleased God to reveal His Son in me. The supreme test of sonship is the forgiveness of sin. The test of your imagination is Christ Jesus, the Son of God, is your ability to forgive sin. Sin means missing one's mark in life, falling short of one's ideal, failing to achieve one's aim. Forgiveness means identification of man with his ideal or aim in life. This is the work of awakened imagination, the supreme work, for it tests man's ability to enter into and partake of the nature of his opposite. Let the weak man say, I am strong. Reasonably, this is impossible. Only awakened imagination can enter into and partake of the nature of its opposite. This conception of Christ Jesus as human imagination raises these fundamental questions. Is imagination a power sufficient not merely to enable me to assume that I am strong, but is it also of itself capable of executing the idea? Suppose that I desire to be in some other place or situation. Could I, by imagining myself into such a state and place, bring about their physical realization? Suppose I could not afford the journey, and suppose my present social and financial status suppose the idea that I want to realize. Would imagination be sufficient of itself to incarnate these desires? Does imagination comprehend reason? By reason, I mean deductions from the observations of the senses. Does it recognize the external world of facts? In the practical way of everyday life is imagination a complete guide to behavior. Suppose I am capable of acting with continuous imagination. That is, suppose I am capable of sustaining the feeling of my wish fulfilled. Will my assumption harden into fact? And if it does harden into fact, shall I in reflection find that my actions through the period of incubation have been reasonable? Is my imagination of power sufficient, not merely to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, but is it also of itself capable of incarnating the idea, after assuming that I am already what I want to be? Must I continually guide myself by reasonable ideas and actions in order to bring about the fulfillment of my assumption? Experience has convinced me that an assumption, though false, if persisted in, will harden into fact. That continuous imagination is sufficient for all things, and all my reasonable plans and actions will never make up for my lack of continuous imagination. Is it not true that the teachings of the Gospels can only be received in terms of faith, and that the Son of God is constantly looking for signs of faith in people? That is, faith in their own imagination is not the promise. Believe that ye receive, and ye shall receive. The same as imagine that you are, and you shall be. Was it not an imaginary state in which Moses endured, as seeing him who is invisible? Was it not by the power of his own imagination that he endured? Truth depends upon the intensity of the imagination, not upon external facts. Facts are the fruit-bearing witness of the use of the imagination. Man becomes what he imagines. He has a self-determined history. Imagination is the way, the truth, the life revealed. He cannot get hold of truth with the logical mind. Where the natural man of sense sees a bud, imagination sees a rose full blown. Truth cannot be encompassed by fact. As we awaken to the imaginative life, we discover that to imagine a thing is to make it so, that a true judgment need not conform to the external reality to which it relates. The imaginative man does not deny the reality of the sensuous outer world of becoming, but he knows that it is the inner world of continuous imagination that is the force by which the sensuous outer world becoming is brought to pass. He sees the outer world and all its happenings as projections of the inner world of imagination. To him, everything is a manifestation of the mental activity which goes on in man's imagination without the sensuous, reasonable man being aware of it. But he realizes that every man must become conscious of this inner activity and see the relationship between the inner causal world of imagination and the sensuous outer world of effect. It is a marvelous thing to find that you can imagine yourself into the state of your fulfilled desire and escape from the jails which ignorance built. The real man is a magnificent imagination. It is this self that must be awakened. Awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee life. The moment man discovers that his imagination is Christ, he accomplishes acts which on this level can only be called miraculous. But until man has the sense of Christ as his imagination, you did not choose me, I have chosen you. He will see everything in pure objectivity without any subjective relationship, not realizing that all that he encounters is part of himself. He rebels at the thought that he has chosen the conditions of his life, that they are related by affinity to his own mental activity. Man must firmly come to believe that reality lies within him and not without. Although others have bodies, a life of their own, their reality is rooted in you, ends in you, as yours ends in God. Chapter 2, Sealed Instructions. The first power that meets us at the threshold of the soul's domain is the power of imagination. I was first made conscious of the power, nature, and redemptive function of imagination through the teachings of my friend Abdullah. And through subsequent experiences, I learned that Jesus was a symbol of the coming of imagination to man, that the test of his birth in man was the individual's ability to forgive sin. That is, his ability to identify himself or another with his aim in life. Without the identification of man with his aim, the forgiveness of sin is an impossibility, and only the Son of God can forgive sin. Therefore, man's ability to identify himself with his aim, though reason and his senses deny it, is proof of the birth of Christ in him. To passively surrender to appearances and bow before the evidence of facts is to confess that Christ is not yet born in you. Although this teaching shocked and repelled me at first, for I was a convinced and earnest Christian, and did not then know that Christianity could not be inherited by the mere accident of birth, but must be consciously adopted as a way of life. It's told later on, through visions, mystical revelations, and practical experiences, into my understanding and found its interpretation in a deeper mood. But I must confess that it is a trying time when those things are shaken which one has always taken for granted. Seest thou these great buildings? There shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. Not one stone of literal understanding will be left after one drinks the water of psychological meaning. All that has been built up by natural religion is cast into the flames of mental fire. Yet what better way is there to understand Christ Jesus than to identify the central character of the Gospels with human imagination? Knowing that every time your imagination lovingly on behalf of another, you are literally mediating God to man, and thereby feeding and clothing Christ Jesus, and that whenever you imagine evil against another, you are literally beating and crucifying Christ Jesus. Every imagination of man is either the cup of cold water or the sponge of vinegar to the parched lips of Christ. Let none of you imagine evil in your hearts against his neighbor, warned the prophet Zechariah. When man heeds this advice, he will awake from the imposed sleep of Adam into the full consciousness of the Son of God. He is in the world, and the world is made by him, and the world knows him not. Human imagination. I ask myself many times, if my imagination is Christ Jesus, and all things are possible to Christ Jesus, are all things possible to me? Through experience, I have come to know that when I identify myself with my aim in life, then Christ is awake in me. Christ is sufficient for all things. For in him dwelleth all the fullness of the Godhead bodily. And ye are complete in him, which is the head of all principality and power. My grace is sufficient for thee. I lay down my life that I might take it again. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. What a comfort it is to know that all that I experience is the result of my own standard of belief. That I am the center of my own web of circumstances, and that as I change, so must my outer world. The world presents different appearances according as our states of consciousness differ. What we see when we are identified with a state cannot be seen when we are no longer fused with it. By state is meant all that man believes and consents to as true. No idea presented to the mind can realize itself unless the mind accepts it. It depends on the acceptance, the state with which we are identified, how things present themselves. In the fusion of imagination and state is to be found the shaping of the world as it seems. The world is a revelation of the states with which imagination is fused. It is the state from which we think that determines the objective world in which we live. The rich man, the poor man, the good man, the thief are what they are by virtue of the states from which they view the world. On the distinction between these states depends the distinction between the worlds of these men. Individually, so different is this same world. It is not the actions and behavior of the good man that should be matched, but his point of view. Outer reforms are useless if the inner state is not changed. Success is gained not by imitating the outer actions of the successful, but by right inner actions and inner talking. If we detach ourselves from a state, and we may, at any moment, the conditions and circumstances to which that union gave being vanish. It was in the fall of 1933 in New York City that I approached Abdullah with a problem. He asked me one simple question: what do you want? I told him that I would like to spend the winter in Barbados, but that I was broke. I literally did not have a nickel. If you will imagine yourself to be in Barbados, said he, thinking and viewing the world from that state of consciousness, instead of thinking of Barbados, you will spend the winter there. You must not concern yourself with the ways and means of getting there, for the state of consciousness of already being in Barbados, if occupied by your imagination, will devise the means best suited to realize itself. Man lives by committing himself to invisible states, by fusing his imagination with what he knows to be other than himself, and in this union he experiences the result of that fusion. No one can lose what he has, save by detachment from the state where the things experienced have their natural life. You must imagine yourself right into the state of your fulfilled desire, Abdullah told me, and fall asleep viewing the world from Barbados. The world which we describe from observation must be, as we describe it, relative to ourselves. Our imagination connects us with the state desired, but we must use imagination masterfully, not as an onlooker thinking of the end, but as a partaker thinking from the end. We must actually be there in imagination. If we do this, our subjective experience will be realized objectively. This is not mere fancy, said he, but a truth you can prove by experience. His appeal to enter into the wish fulfilled was the secret of thinking from the end. Every state is already there as mere possibility as long as you think of it, but is overpoweringly real when you think from it. Thinking from the end is the way of Christ. I began right there and then, fixing my thoughts beyond the limits of sense, beyond that aspect to which my present state gave me, towards the feeling of already being in Barbados and viewing the world from that standpoint. He emphasized the importance of the state from which man views the world as he falls asleep. All prophets claim that the voice of God is chiefly heard by man in dreams. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls upon men in slumbering upon the bed. Then he openeth the ears of men and sealeth their instruction. That night, and for several nights thereafter, I fell asleep in the assumption that I was in my father's house in Barbados. Within a month, I received a letter from my brother saying that he had a strong desire to have the family together at Christmas and asking me to use the enclosed steamship ticket for Barbados. I sailed 2 days after I received my brother's letter and spent a wonderful winter in Barbados. This experience has convinced me that man can be anything he pleases if he will make the conception habitual and think from the end. It has also shown me that I can no longer excuse myself by placing the blame on the world of external things, that my good and my evil have no dependency except from myself, that it depends on the state from which I view the world, how things present themselves. Man, who is free in his choice, acts from conceptions which he freely, though not always wisely, chooses. All conceivable states are awaiting our choice and occupancy, but no amount of rationalizing will of itself yield us the state of consciousness which is the only thing worth having. The imaginative image is the only thing to seek. The ultimate purpose of imagination is to create in us the Spirit of Jesus, which is continual forgiveness of sin, continual identification of man with his ideal. Only by identifying ourselves with our aim can we forgive ourselves for having missed it. All else is labor in vain. On this path, to whatever place or state we convey our imagination, to that place or state we will gravitate physically also. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. By sleeping in my Father's house in my imagination, as though I slept there in the flesh, I fused my imagination with that state and was compelled to experience that state in the flesh also. So vivid was this state to me. I could have been seen in my Father's house had any sense of it. Entered a room where in imagination I was sleeping. A man can be seen where in imagination he is, for a man must be where his imagination is, for his imagination is himself. This I know from experience, for I have been seen by a few to whom I desire to be seen, when physically I was hundreds of miles away. I, by the intensity of my imagination and feeling, imagining and feeling myself to be in Barbados, instead of merely thinking of Barbados, had spanned the vast Atlantic to influence my brother into desiring my presence to complete the family circle at Christmas. Thinking from the end, from the feeling of my wish fulfilled, was the source of everything that happened as outer cause, such as my brother's impulse to send me a steamship ticket. And it was also the cause of everything that appeared as result. In ideas of good and evil, William Butler Yeats, having described a few experiences similar to this experience of mine, writes, "If all who have described events like this have not grieved, we should rewrite our history, for all men certainly, all imaginative men, must be forever casting forth enchantments, glamour, illusions, and all men, especially tranquil men who have no powerful egotistic life, must be continually passing under their power. Determined imagination, thinking from the end, is the beginning of all miracles. I would like to give you an immense belief in miracles, but a miracle is only the name given by those who have no knowledge of the power and function of imagination to the works of imagination. Imagining oneself into the feeling of the wish fulfilled is the means by which a new state is entered. This gives the state the quality of isness. Hermes tells us that which is manifested. That which has been or shall be is unmanifested, but not dead. For so the eternal activity of God animates all things, the future must become the present in the imagination of the one who would wisely and consciously create circumstances. We must translate vision into being, thinking of into thinking from. Imagination must center itself in some state and view the world from that state. Thinking from the end is an intense perception of the world of fulfilled desire. Thinking from the state desired is creative living. Ignorance of this ability to think from the end is bondage. It is the root of all bondage with which man is bound. To passively surrender to the evidence of the senses underestimates the capacities of the inner self. Once man accepts thinking from the end as a creative principle in which he can cooperate, then he is redeemed from the absurdity of ever attempting to achieve his objective by merely thinking of it. Construct all ends according to the pattern of fulfilled desire. The whole of life is just the appeasement of hunger, and the infinite states of consciousness from which a man can view the world are purely a means of satisfying that hunger. The principle upon which each state is organized is some form of hunger to lift the passion for self-gratification to ever higher and higher levels of experience. Desire is the mainspring of the mental machinery. It is a blessed thing. It is a right and natural craving which has a state of consciousness as its right and natural satisfaction. But one thing I do, forgetting the things which are behind and stretching forward to the things which are before, I press on towards the goal. It is necessary to have an aim in life. Without an aim, we drift. What wantest thou of me? What wantest thou that I shall do unto thee? Well, it is the implied question asked most often by the central figure of the gospel. In defining your aim, you must want it. As the heart panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. It is lack of this passionate direction to life that makes man fail of accomplishment. The spanning of the bridge between desire, thinking of, and satisfaction, thinking from, is all important. We must move mentally from thinking of the end to thinking from the end. This reason could never do. By its nature, it is restricted to the evidence of the senses, but the imagination, having no such limitation, can. Desire exists to be gratified in the activity of imagination. Through imagination, man escapes from the limitation of the senses and the bondage of reason. There is no stopping the man who can think from the end. Nothing can stop him. He creates the means and grows his way out of limitation into ever greater and greater mansions of the Lord. It does not matter what he has been or what he is. All that matters is what does he want. He knows that the world is a manifestation of the mental activity which goes on within himself. So he strives to determine and control the ends from which he thinks. In his imagination he dwells in the end, confident that he shall dwell there in the flesh also. He puts his whole trust in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and lives by committing himself to that state. For the art of fortune is to tempt himself to do. Like the man at the pool of Bethesda, he is ready for the moving of the waters of imagination. Knowing that every desire is right-brained to him who knows how to think from the end, he is indifferent to mere reasonable probability and confident that through continuous imagination, his assumptions will harden into fact. But how to persuade men everywhere that thinking from the end is the only living, how to foster it in every activity of man, how to reveal it as the plenitude of life and not the compensation of the disappointed. That is the problem. Life is a controllable thing. You can experience what you please once you realize that you are His Son and that you are what you are by virtue of the state of consciousness from which you think and view the world. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. Chapter 3, Highways of the Inner World. And the children struggled within her. And the Lord said unto her, Two nations are in thy womb, and two manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. And the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. Duality is an inherent condition of life. Everything that exists is double. Man is a dual creature with contrary principles embedded in his nature. They war within him and present attitudes to life which are antagonistic. This conflict is the eternal enterprise, the war in heaven, the never-ending struggle of the younger or inner man of imagination to assert his supremacy over the elder or outer man of sense. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. He it is who coming after me is preferred before me. The second man is the Lord from heaven. Man begins to awake to the imaginative life the moment he feels the presence of another being in himself. In your limbs lie nations twain, rival races from their birth. One the mastery shall gain, the younger over the elder reign. There are two distinct centers of thought or outlook on the world, possessed by every man. The Bible speaks of these two outlooks as natural and spiritual. The natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. Man's inner body is as real in the world of subjective experience as his outer physical body is real in the world of external reality. But the inner body expresses a more fundamental part of reality. This existing inner body of man must be consciously exercised and directed. The inner world of thought and feeling to which the inner body is attuned has its real structure and exists in its own higher space. There are two kinds of movement. One that is according to the inner body and another that is according to the outer body. The movement which is according to the inner body is causal, but the outer movement is under compulsion. The inner movement determines the outer, which is joined to it, bringing into the outer a movement that is similar to the actions of the inner body. Inner movement is the force by which all events are brought to pass. Outer movement is subject to the compulsion applied to it by the movement of the inner body. Whenever the actions of the inner body match the actions which the outer must take to appease desire, that desire will be realized. Construct mentally a drama which implies that your desire is realized, and make it one which involves movement of self. Immobilize your outer physical self. Act precisely as though you are going to take a nap and start the predetermined action in imagination. A vivid representation of the action is the beginning of that action. Then, as you are falling asleep, consciously imagine yourself into the scene. The length of the sleep is not important. A short nap is sufficient. But carrying the action into sleep thickens fancy into fact. At first your thoughts may be like rambling sheep that have no shepherd. Don't despair. Should your attention stray 70 times 7, bring it back 70 times 7 to its predetermined course, until from sheer exhaustion it follows the appointed path. The inner journey must never be without direction. When you take to the inner road, it is to do what you did mentally before you started. You go for the prize. You have already seen and accepted. In The Road to Xanadu, Professor John Livingston Lowell says, "But I have long had the feeling, which this study had matured to a conviction, that fancy and imagination are not two powers at all, but one. The valid distinction which exists between them lies not in the materials with which they operate, but in the degree of intensity of the operant power itself. Working at high tension, the imaginative energy assimilates and transmutes. Keyed low, the same energy aggregates and yokes together those images which at its highest pitch it merges indissolubly into one. Fancy assembles, imagination fuses." Here is a practical application of this theory. A year ago, a blind girl living in the city of San Francisco found herself confronted with a transportation problem. A rerouting of buses forced her to make 3 transfers between her home and her office. This lengthened her trip from 15 minutes to 2 hours and 15 minutes. She thought seriously about this problem and came to the decision that a car was the solution. She knew that she could not drive a car, but felt that she could be driven in one. Putting this theory to the test, that whenever the actions of the inner self correspond to the actions which the outer physical self must take to appease desire, that desire will be realized, she said to herself, "I will sit here and imagine that I am being driven to my office." Sitting in her living room, she began to imagine herself seated in a car. She felt the rhythm of the motor. She imagined that she smelled the odor of gasoline, felt the motion of the car, touched the sleeve of the driver, and felt that the driver was a man. She felt the car stop, and turning to her companion, said, "Thank you very much, sir." To which he replied, "The pleasure is all mine." Then she stepped from the car and heard the door snap shut as she closed it. He told me that she centered her imagination on being in a car, and although blind, viewed the city from her imaginary ride. He did not think of the ride. He thought from the ride and all that it implied. This controlled and subjectively directed purposive ride raised her imagination to its full potency. She kept her purpose ever before her, knowing there was cohesion in purpose's inner movement. In these mental journeys, an emotional continuity must be sustained. The emotion of fulfilled desire, expectancy and desire were so intensely joined that they passed at once from a mental state into a physical act. The inner self moves along the predetermined course, best when the emotions collaborate. The inner self must be fired, and it is best fired by the thought of great deeds and personal gain. We must take pleasure in our action. On 2 successive days, the blind girl took her imaginary ride, giving it all the joy and sensory vividness of reality. A few hours after her second imaginary ride, a friend told her of a story in the evening paper. It was a story of a man who was interested in the blind. The blind girl phoned him and stated her problem. The very next day, on his way home, he stopped in at a bar. And Wilder had the urge to tell the story of the blind girl to his friend, the proprietor. A total stranger, on hearing the story, volunteered to drive the blind girl home every day. The man who told the story then said, "If you will take her home, I will take her to work." This was over a year ago. And since that day, this blind girl has been driven to and from her office by these 2 gentlemen. Now, instead of spending 2 hours and 15 minutes on 3 buses, she's at her office in less than 15 minutes. And on that first ride to her office, she turned to her good Samaritan and said, "Thank you very much, sir." And he replied, "The pleasure is all mine." Thus, the objects of her imagination were to her the realities of which the physical manifestation was only the witness. The determinative, animating principle was the imaginative ride. Her triumph could be a surprise only to those who did not know of her inner ride. She mentally viewed the world from this imaginative ride with such a clearness of vision that every aspect of the city attained identity. These inner movements not only produced corresponding outer movements. This is the law which operates beneath all physical appearance. He who practices these exercises of bilocation will develop unusual powers of concentration and quiescence, and will inevitably achieve waking consciousness on the inner and dimensionally larger world. Actualizing strongly, she fulfilled her desire. For, viewing the city from the feeling of her wish fulfilled, she matched the state desired and granted that to herself, which sleeping men ask of God. To realize your desire, an action must start in your imagination, apart from the evidence of the senses involving movement of self and implying fulfillment of your desire. Whenever it is the action which the outer self takes to appease desire, that desire will be realized. The movement of every visible object is caused not by things outside the body, but by things within it, which operate from within outward. The journey is in yourself. You travel along the highways of the inner world. Without inner movement, it is impossible to bring forth anything. Inner action is introverted sensation. If you will construct mentally a drama which implies that you have realized your objective, then close your eyes and drop your thoughts inward, centering your imagination all the while in the predetermined action, and partake in that action. You will become a self-determined being. Inner action orders all things according to the nature of itself. Try it and see whether a desirable ideal once formulated is possible. For only by this process of experiment can you realize your potentiality. It is thus that this creative principle is being realized. So the clue to purposive living is to center your imagination in the action, and feeling a fulfilled desire with such awareness, such sensitiveness that you initiate and experience movement upon the inner world. Ideas only act if they are felt, if they awaken inner movement. Inner movement is conditioned by self-motivation, outer movement by compulsion. Wherever the sole of your foot shall tread, the same give I unto you. And remember, the Lord thy God in the midst of thee is mighty. Chapter 4. The pruning shears of revision. The second man is the Lord from heaven. Never will he say caterpillars. He'll say, there's a lot of butterflies as is to be on our cabbages. Pure. He won't say, it's winter. He'll say, summer's sleeping, and there's no bud, little enough, nor sad colored enough, for orchestra not to calend the beginning of the blow. The very first act of correction or cure is always revised. One must start with oneself. It is one's attitude that must be changed. What we are, that only can we see. It is a most healthy and productive exercise to daily relive the day as you wish you had lived it, revising the scenes to make them conform to your ideal. For instance, suppose today's mail brought disappointing news. Revise the letter. Mentally rewrite it and make it conform to the news you wish you had received. Then, in imagination, read the revised letter over and over again. This is the essence of revision. And revision results in repeal. The one requisite is to arouse your attention in a way and to such intensity that you become wholly absorbed in the revised action. You will experience an expansion and refinement of the senses by this imaginative exercise and eventually achieve vision. But always remember that the ultimate purpose of this exercise is to create in you the Spirit of Jesus, which is continual forgiveness of sin. Revision is of greatest importance when the motive is to change oneself, when there is a sincere desire to be something different, when the longing is to awaken the ideal active spirit of forgiveness. Without imagination, man remains a being of sin. Man either goes forward to imagination or remains imprisoned in his senses. To go forward to imagination is to forgive. Forgiveness is the life of the imagination. The art of living is the art of forgiving. Forgiveness is, in fact, experiencing in imagination the revised version of the day. Experiencing in imagination what you wish you had experienced in the flesh. Every time one really forgives, that is, every time one relives the event as it should have been lived, one is born again. Father, forgive them. Is not the plea that comes once a year, but the opportunity that comes every day. The idea of forgiving is a daily possibility, and if it is sincerely done, it will lift man to higher and higher levels of being. He will experience a daily Easter. And Easter is the idea of rising transformed. And that should be almost a continuous process. Freedom and forgiveness are indissolubly linked. Not to forgive is to be at war with ourselves, for we are freed according to our capacity to forgive. Forgive, and you shall be forgiven. Forgive, not merely from a sense of duty or service. Forgive because you want to. Thy ways are ways of pleasantness, and all thy paths are peace. You must take pleasure in revision. You can forgive others effectively only when you have a sincere desire to identify them with their ideal. Duty has no momentum. Forgiveness is a matter of deliberately withdrawing attention from the unrevised day and giving it full strength and joyously to the revised day. If a man begins to revise even a little of the vexations and troubles of the day, then he begins to work practically on himself. Every revision is a victory over himself, and therefore a victory over his enemy. A man's foes are those of his own household, and his household is his state of mind. He changes his future as he revises his day. When a man practices the art of forgiveness, of revision, however factual the scene on which sight then rests, he revises it with his imagination and gazes on one never before witnessed. The magnitude of the change which any act of revision involves makes such change appear wholly improbable to the realist, the unimaginative man. But the radical changes in the fortunes of the prodigal were all produced by a change of heart. The battle man fights is fought out in his own imagination. The man who does not revise the day has lost the vision of that life, into the likeness of which it is the true labor of the Spirit of Jesus to transform this life. All things whatsoever ye would that men should do to you, even so do ye to them. For this is the law. Here is the way an artist friend forgave herself and was set free from pain, annoyance, and unfriendliness, knowing that nothing but forgetfulness and forgiveness will bring us to new values. He cast herself upon her imagination and escape from the prison of her senses. She writes, Thursday, I taught all day in the art school. Only one small thing marred the day. Coming into my afternoon classroom, I discovered the janitor had left all the chairs on top of the desk after cleaning the floor. As I lifted a chair down, it slipped from my grasp and struck me a sharp blow on the instep of my right foot. I immediately examined my thoughts and found that I had criticized the man for not doing his job properly. Since he had lost his helper, I realized he probably felt he had done more than enough, and it was an unwanted gift that had bounced and hit me on the foot. Looking down at my foot, I saw both my skin and nylons were intact, so forgot the whole thing. That night, after I'd been working intensely for about 3 hours on a drawing, I decided to make myself a cup of coffee. To my utter amazement, I couldn't manage my right foot at all, and it was giving out great bumps of pain. I hopped over to a chair and took off my slipper to look at it. The entire foot was a strange purplish pink, swollen out of shape and red hot. I tried walking on it and found that it just flapped. I had no control over it whatsoever. It looked like one of two things. Either I had cracked a bone when I dropped the chair on it, or something could be dislocated. No use speculating what it is. Better get rid of it right away. So I became quiet, all ready to melt myself into light. To my complete bewilderment, my imagination refused to cooperate. It just said no. This sort of thing often happens when I am painting. I just started to argue, why not? It just kept saying no. Finally, I gave up and said, you know I am in pain. I am trying hard not to be frightened, but you are the boss. What do you want to do? The answer, go to bed and review the day's events. So I said, all right. But let me tell you, if my foot isn't perfect by tomorrow morning, you have only yourself to blame. After arranging the bedclothes so they didn't touch my foot, I started to review the day. It was slow going as I had difficulty keeping my attention away from my foot. I went through the whole day, saw nothing to add to the chair incident. But when I reached the early evening, I found myself coming face to face with a man who for the past year has made a point of not speaking. The first time this happened, I thought he had grown deaf. I had known him since school days, but we had never done more than say hello and comment on the weather. Mutual friends assured me I had done nothing, that he said he never liked me, and finally decided it was not worthwhile speaking. I had said, hi. He hadn't answered. I found that I thought, poor guy, what a horrid state to be in. I shall do something about this ridiculous state of affairs. So in my imagination, I stopped right there and we did the scene. I said, hi. He answered, hi, and smiled. I now thought, good old days. I ran the scene over a couple of times and went on to the next incident and finished up the day. Now what do we do, my foot or the concert? I had been melting and wrapping up a wonderful present of courage and success for a friend who was to make her debut the following day, and I had been looking forward to giving it to her tonight. My imagination sounded a little bit solemn as it said, let us do the concert. It will be more fun. But first, couldn't we just take my perfectly good imagination foot out of this physical one before we start? I pleaded, by all means. That done, I had a lovely time at the concert, and my friend got a tremendous ovation. By now, I was very, very sleepy and fell asleep doing my project. The next morning, as I was putting on my slipper, I suddenly had a quick memory picture of withdrawing a discolored and swollen foot from the same slipper. I took my foot out and looked at it. It was perfectly normal in every respect. There was a tiny pink spot on the instep But I remembered I had hit it with the chair. What a vivid dream that was, I thought, and dressed. While waiting for my coffee, I wandered over to my drafting table and saw that all my brushes were lying shelter and unwashed. Whatever possessed you to leave your brushes like that? Don't you remember? It was because of your foot. So it hadn't been a dream after all, but a beautiful healing. She had won by the art of revision what you would never have won by force. In heaven, the only art of living is forgiving, especially to the female. We should take our life, not as it appears to be, but from the vision of this artist, from the vision of the world made perfect that is buried under all minds, buried and waiting for us to revise the day. We are led to believe a lie when we see with not through the eye a revision of the day, and what she held to be so stubbornly real was no longer so to her, and like a dream had quietly faded away. You can revise the day to please yourself, and by experiencing in imagination. The revised speech and actions not only modify the trend of your life story, but turn all its discord into harmony. The one who discovers the secret of revision cannot do otherwise than let himself be guided by love. Your effectiveness will increase with practice. Revision is the way by which right can find its appropriate might. Resist not evil. All passionate conflicts result in an interchange of characteristics. To him that knoweth to do good, and doeth it not, to him it is sin. To know the truth, you must live the truth. And to live the truth, your inner actions must match the actions of your fulfilled desire. Expectancy and desire must become one. Your outer world is only actualized inner movement. Through ignorance of the law of revision, those who take to warfare are perpetually defeated. Only concepts that idealize depict the truth. Your ideal of man is his truest self. It is because I firmly believe that whatever is most profoundly imaginative is, in reality, most directly practical, that I ask you to live imaginatively and to think into and to personally appropriate the transcendent saying, Christ in you, the hope of glory. Don't blame, only resolve. It is not man and the earth at their loveliest, but you practicing the art of revision make paradise. The evidence of this truth can lie only in your own experience of it. Try revising the day. It is to the pruning shears of revision that we owe our prime fruit. Chapter 5. The coin of heaven. There's a firm persuasion the thing is so. Make it so. And the prophet replied, all poets believed that it does. And in ages of imagination, this firm persuasion removed mountains. But many are not capable of a firm persuasion of anything. Let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. Persuasion is an inner effort of intense attention. To listen attentively as though you heard is to evoke, to activate. By listening, you can hear what you want to hear and persuade those beyond the range of the outer ear. Speak it inwardly in your imagination only. Make your inner conversation match your fulfilled desire. What you desire to hear without, you must hear within. Embrace the without within, and become one who hears only that which implies the fulfillment of his desire, and all the external happenings in the world will become a bridge leading to the objective realization of your desire. Your inner speech is perpetually written all around you in happening. Learn to relate these happenings to your inner speech, and you will become self-taught. By inner speech is meant those mental conversations which you carry on with yourself. They may be inaudible when you are awake because of the noise and distractions of the outer world of becoming. But they are quite audible in deep meditation and dream. Or whether they be audible or inaudible, you are their author and fashion your world in their likeness. There is a God in heaven, and heaven is within you that revealeth secrets and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and the visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. Inner speech from premises of fulfilled desire is the way to create an intelligible world for yourself. Observe your inner speech, for it is the cause of future action. Inner speech reveals the state of consciousness from which you view the world. Make your inner speech match your fulfilled desire, for your inner speech is manifested all around you in happening. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. Behold, we put bits in the horses' mouths, that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. Behold also the ships, which though they be so great, and are driven by fierce winds, yet are they turned about with a very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth. Even so, the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. The whole manifested world goes to show us what use we have made of the word inner speech. An uncritical observation of our inner talking will reveal to us the ideas from which we view the world. Inner talking mirrors our imagination, and our imagination mirrors the state with which it is fused. If the state with which we are fused is the cause of the phenomenon of our life, then we are relieved of the burden of wondering what to do, for we have no alternative but to identify ourselves with our aim. And inasmuch as the state with which we are identified mirrors itself in our inner speech, then to change the state with which we are fused, we must first change our inner talking. It is our inner conversations which make tomorrow's fact. Put off the former conversation, the old man which is corrupt, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind. Put on the new man which is created in righteousness. Our minds, like our stomachs, are whetted by change of food. Stop all of the old mechanical negative inner talking and start a new positive and constructive inner speech from premises of fulfilled desire. Inner talking is the beginning, the sowing of the seeds of future action. To determine the action, you must consciously initiate and control your inner talking. Construct a sentence which implies the fulfillment of your aim, such as, I have a large, steady, dependable income, consistent with integrity and mutual benefit, or I am happily married, I am wanted, I am contributing to the good of the world. And repeat such a sentence over and over until you are inwardly affected by it. Our inner speech represents in various ways the world we live in. In the beginning was the Word, that which is so ye reap. Yonder field, the sesamum was sesamum, the corn was corn, the silence and the darkness knew. So is a man's fate born. Ends run true to origin. Those that go searching for love only make manifest their own lovelessness. And the loveless never find love. Only the loving find love, and they never have to seek for it. Man attracts what he is. The art of life is to sustain the feeling of the wish fulfilled and let things come to you. Not to go after them or think they flee away. Observe your inner talking and remember your aim. Do they match? Does your inner talking match what you would say ordinarily had you achieved your goal? The individual's inner speech and actions attract the conditions of his life. Through uncritical self-observation of your inner talking, you find where you are in the inner world. And where you are in the inner world is what you are in the outer world. You put on the new man whenever ideals and inner speech match. In this way alone can the new man be born. Inner talking matures in the dark. From the dark, it issues into the light. The right inner speech is the speech that would be yours, for you to realize your ideal. In other words, it is the speech of fulfilled desire. I am that. There are two gifts which God has bestowed upon man alone and on no other mortal creature. These two are mind and speech, and the gift of mind and speech is equivalent to that of immortality. If a man uses these two gifts rightly, he will differ in nothing from the immortal. And when he quits the body, mind and speech will be his guides. And by them, he will be brought into the troop of the gods and the souls that have attained to bliss. The circumstances and conditions of life are outpictured inner talking, solidified sound. Inner speech calls events into existence. In every event is the creative sound that is its life and being. All that a man believes and consents to as true reveals itself in his inner speech. It is his word, his life. Try to notice what you're saying in yourself at this moment, to what thoughts and feelings you are consenting. They will be perfectly woven into your tapestry of life. To change your life, you must change your inner talking. For life, said Hermes, is the union of word and mind. When imagination matches your inner speech to fulfill desire, there will then be a straight path in yourself from within out, and the without will instantly reflect the within for you, and you will know reality is only actualized inner talking. Receive with meekness the inborn word which is able to save your soul. Every stage of man's progress is made by the conscious exercise of his imagination, matching his inner speech to his fulfilled desire. Because man does not perfectly match them. The results are uncertain, while they might be perfectly certain. Persistent assumption of the wish fulfilled is the means of fulfilling the intention. As we control our inner talking, matching it to our fulfilled desires, we can lay aside all other processes. Then we simply act by clear imagination and intention. We imagine the wish fulfilled and carry on mental conversations from that premise. Through controlled inner talking from premises of fulfilled desire, seeming miracles are performed. The future becomes the present and reveals itself in our inner speech. To be held by the inner speech of fulfilled desire is to be safely anchored in life. Our lives may seem to be broken by events, but they are never broken so long as we retain the inner speech of fulfilled desire. All happiness depends on the active, voluntary use of imagination to construct and inwardly affirm that we are what we want to be. We match ourselves to our ideals by constantly remembering our aim and identifying ourselves with it. We fuse with our aims by frequently occupying the feeling of our wish fulfilled. It is the frequency, the habitual occupancy, that is the secret of success. The oftener we do it, the more natural it is. Fancy assembles. Continuous imagination fuses. It is possible to resolve every situation by the proper use of imagination. Our task is to get the right sentence, the one which implies that our desire is realized, and fire the imagination with it. All this is intimately connected with the mystery of the still small voice. Inner talking reveals the activities of imagination, activities which are the causes of the circumstances of life. As a rule, man is totally unaware of his inner talking, and therefore sees himself not as the cause, but the victim of circumstance. To consciously create circumstance, man must consciously direct his inner speech, matching the still small voice to his fulfilled desire. He calls things not seen as though they were. Right inner speech is essential. It is the greatest of the arts. It is the way out of limitation into freedom. Ignorance of this art has made the world a battlefield and penitentiary where blood and sweat alone are expected, when it should be a place of marveling and wondering. Right inner talking is the first step to becoming what you want to be. Speech is an image of mind, and mind is an image of God. On the morning of April 12, 1953, my wife was awakened by the sound of a great voice of authority speaking within her and saying, "You must stop spending your thought, time, and money. Everything in life must be an investment. To spend is to waste, to squander, to lay out without return. To invest is to lay out for a purpose from which a profit is expected." This revelation of my wife is about the importance of the moment. It is about the transformation of the moment. What we desire does not lie in the future, but in ourselves at this very moment. At any moment in our lives, we are faced with an infinite choice. What we are and what we want to be. And what we want to be is already existent. But to realize it, we must match our inner speech and actions to it. If two of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father, which is in heaven. It is only what is done now that counts. The present moment does not recede into the past. It advances into the future to confront it, spend or invest it. Thought is the coin of heaven. Money is its earthly symbol. Every moment must be invested, and our inner talking reveals whether we are spending or investing. Be more interested in what you are inwardly saying now than what you have said by choosing wisely what you think and what you feel now. Anytime we feel misunderstood, misused, neglected, suspicious, afraid, we are spending our thoughts and wasting our time. Whenever we assume the feeling of being what we want to be, we are investing. We cannot abandon the moment to negative inner talking and expect to retain command of life. Before us go the result of all that seemingly is behind. Not gone is the last moment, but oncoming. My word shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereto I sent it. The circumstances of life are the muffled utterances of the inner talking that made them. the Word made visible. The Word, said Hermes, is Son, and the mind is Father of the Word. They are not separate one from the other, for life is the union of Word and mind. He willed us forth from himself by the word of truth. Let us be imitators of God as dear children, and use our inner speech wisely to mold an outer world in harmony with our ideal. The Lord spake by me, and his word was in my tongue. The mouth of God is the mind of man. Feed God only the best, whatsoever things are of good report. Think on these things. The present moment is always precisely right for an investment, to inwardly speak the right word. The word is very near to you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it. See, I have set before you this day life and good, death and evil, blessings and cursings. Choose life. You choose life and good and blessings by being that which you choose. Like is known to like alone. Make your inner speech blessed and give good report. Man's ignorance of the future is the result of his ignorance, of his inner talking. His inner talking mirrors his imagination, and his imagination is a government in which the opposition never comes into power. If the reader asks, what if the inner speech remains subjective and is unable to find an object for its love? The answer is, it will not remain subjective, for the very simple reason that inner speech is always objectifying itself. What frustrates and festers and becomes the disease that afflicts humanity is man's ignorance of the art of matching inner words to fulfill desire. Inner speech mirrors imagination, and imagination is Christ. Also, your inner speech and your perceptual world changes. Whenever inner speech and desire are in conflict, inner speech invariably wins. Because inner speech objectifies itself. It is easy to see that if it matches desire, desire will be objectively realized. Were this not so, I would say, with Blake, sooner murder an infant in its cradle than nurse unacted desire. But I know from experience the tongue setteth on fire the course of nature. Chapter 6. It is within. Rivers, mountains, cities, villages, all are human. And when you enter into their bosoms, you walk in heavens and earth. As in your own bosom you bear your heaven and earth, and all you behold. So that appears without, it is within, in your imagination, of which this world of mortality is but a shadow. The inner world was as real to Blake as the outer land of waking life. He looked upon his dreams and visions as the realities of the forms of nature. Blake reduced everything to the bedrock of his own consciousness. The kingdom of heaven is within you. The real man, the imaginative man, has invested the outer world with all of its properties. The apparent reality of the outer world, which is so hard to dissolve, is only proof of the absolute reality of the inner world of his own imagination. No man can come to me except the Father which has sent me drawing. I and my Father are one. The world which is described from observation is a manifestation of the mental activity of the observer. When man discovers that his world is his own mental activity made visible, that no man can come unto him except he draws him, and that there is no one to change but himself, his own imaginative self, his first impulse is to reshape the world in the image of his ideal. But his ideal is not so easily incarnated. In that moment when he ceases to conform to external discipline, he must impose upon himself a far more rigorous discipline, the self-discipline upon which the realization of his ideal depends. Imagination is not entirely untrammeled and free to move at will without any rules to constrain it. In fact, the contrary is true. Imagination travels according to habit. Imagination has choice, but it chooses according to habit. Awake or asleep, man's imagination is constrained to follow certain definite patterns. It is this benumbing influence of habit that man must change. If he does not, his dreams will fade under the paralysis of custom. Imagination, which is Christ in man, is not subject to the necessity to produce only that which is perfect and good. It exercises its absolute freedom from necessity by endowing the outer physical self with free will to choose to follow good or evil, order or disorder. Choose this day whom ye will serve. But after the choice is made and accepted so that it forms the individual's habitual consciousness, then imagination manifests its infinite power and wisdom by molding the outer sensuous world of becoming in the image of the habitual inner speech and actions of the individual. To realize his ideal, man must first change the pattern which his imagination has followed. Habitual thought is indicative of character. The way to change the outer world is to make the inner speech and action match the outer speech and action of fulfilled desire. Our ideals are waiting to be incarnated. But unless we ourselves match our inner speech and action to the speech and action of fulfilled desire, they are incapable of birth. Inner speech and action are the channels of God's action. He cannot respond to our prayer unless these paths are offered. The outer behavior of man is mechanical. It is subject to the compulsion applied to it by the behavior of the inner self. And old habits of the inner self hang on till replaced by new ones. It is a peculiar property of the second or inner man that he gives to the outer self something similar to his own reality of being. Any change in the behavior of the inner self will result in corresponding outer changes. The mystic calls a change of consciousness death. By death he means not the destruction of imagination and the state with which it was fused, but the dissolution of their union. Fusion is union rather than oneness. Thus, the condition to which that union gave being vanished. I die daily, said Paul to the Corinthians. Blake said to his friend, Kraft Robinson, there is nothing like death. Death is the best thing that can happen in life. But most people die so late and take such an unmerciful time in dying. God knows their neighbors never see them rise from the dead. To the outer man of sense, who knows nothing of the inner man of being. This is sheer nonsense. But Blake made the above quite clear when he wrote in the year before he died. William Blake, one who is very much delighted with being in good company. Born 28 November 1750, 7 in London, and has died several times since. When man has the sense of Christ as his imagination, he sees why Christ must die and rise again from the dead to save man, why he must detach his imagination from his present state and match it to a higher concept of himself if he would rise above his present limitations and thereby save himself. Here is a lovely story of a mystical death which was witnessed by a neighbor. Last week, writes the one who rose from the dead, A friend offered me her home in the mountains for the Christmas holidays, as she thought she might go east. She said that she would let me know this week. We had a very pleasant conversation, and I mentioned you and your teaching in connection with a discussion of Donne's experiment with time, which she had been reading. Her letter arrived Monday. As I picked it up, I had a sudden sense of depression. However, when I read it, she said I could have the house and told me where to get the keys. Instead of being cheerful, I grew still more depressed. So much so, I decided there must have been something between the lines which I was getting intuitively. I unfolded the letter and read the first page through. And as I turned to the second page, I noticed she had written a postscript on the back of the first sheet. It consisted of an extremely blunt and heavy-handed description of an unlovely trait in my character which I had struggled for years to overcome. And for the past 2 years, I thought I had succeeded. Yet here it was again, described with clinical exactitude. I was stunned and desolated. I thought to myself, what is this letter trying to tell me? In the first place, she invited me to use her house, as I had been seeing myself in some lovely home during the holidays. In the second place, nothing comes to me except I draw it. And thirdly, I have been hearing nothing but good news. So the obvious conclusion is that something in me corresponds to this letter, and no matter what it looks like, it is good news. I reread the letter, and as I did so, I asked, what is there here for me to see? And then I saw. It started out. After our conversation of last week, I feel I can tell you. And the rest of the page was as studied with ease and was it as current in a seed cake. A great feeling of elation swept over me. It was all in the past. The thing I had labored so long to correct was done. I suddenly realized that my friend was a witness to my resurrection. I whirled around the studio chanting, it's all in the past. It is done. Thank you, it is done. I gathered all my gratitude up in a big ball of light and shot it straight to you. And if you saw a flash of lightning Monday evening, shortly after 6 your time, that was it. Now, instead of writing a polite letter, because it is the correct thing to do, I can write giving sincere thanks for her frankness and thanking her for the loan of her house. Thank you so much for your teaching, which has made my beloved imagination truly my Savior. And now, if any man should say unto her, lo, here is Christ, or there, she will believe it not, for she knows that the kingdom of God is within her, and that she herself must assume full responsibility for the incarnation of her ideal, and that nothing but death and resurrection will bring her to it. He has found her Savior, her beloved imagination, forever expanding in the bosom of God. There is only one reality, and that is Christ. Human imagination, the inheritance and final achievement of the whole of humanity, that we, seeking the truth in love, may grow up into Him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. Chapter 7. Creation is finished. I am the beginning and the end. There is nothing to come that has not been and is. Blake saw all possible human situations as already made states. He saw every aspect, every plot and drama as already worked out as mere possibilities, as long as we are not in them, but as overpowering realities when we are in them. He described these states as sculptures of Lowes' Hall. Distinguish, therefore, states from individuals in those states. States change, but individual identities never change nor cease. The imagination is not a state, said Blake, It is the human existence itself. Affection or love becomes a state when divided from imagination. Just how important this is to remember is almost impossible to say, but the moment the individual realizes this for the first time is the most momentous in his life. And to be encouraged to feel this is the highest form of encouragement it is possible to give. This truth is common to all men. But the consciousness of it, and much more, the self-consciousness of it, is another matter. The day I realized this great truth, that everything in my world is a manifestation of the mental activity which goes on within me, and that the conditions and circumstances of my life only reflect the state of consciousness with which I am fused, is the most momentous in my life. What the experience that brought me to this certainty is so remote from ordinary existence, I have long hesitated to tell it, for my reason refused to admit the conclusions to which the experience impelled me. Nevertheless, this experience revealed to me that I am supreme within the circle of my own state of consciousness, and that it is the state with which I am identified that determines what I experience. Therefore, it should be shared with all. For to know this is to become free from the world's greatest tyranny, the belief in a second cause. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are they whose imagination has been so purged of the beliefs in second causes. They know that imagination is all, and all is imagination. One day I quietly slipped from my apartment in New York City to some remote yesteryear's countryside. As I entered the dining room of a large inn, I became fully conscious. I knew that my physical body was immobilized on my bed, back in New York. Yet here I was, as awake and as conscious as I have ever been. I intuitively knew that if I could stop the activity of my mind, everything before me would freeze. No sooner was the thought born than the urge to try it possessed me. I felt my head tighten, then thicken to a stillness. My attention concentrated into a crystal clear focus, and the waitress walked not. And I looked through the window, and the leaves falling fell not. And the family of four eating ate not. And they lifting the food lifted it not. Then my attention relaxed. The tightness eased, and of a sudden all moved onward in their course. The leaves fell, the waitress walked, and the family ate. Then I understood Blake's vision of the sculptures of Losses Hall. I thank you to read that whereon he bestowed no labor. Creation is finished. I am the beginning and the end. There is nothing to come that has not been and is. The world of creation is finished, and its original is within us. We saw it before we set forth, and have since been trying to remember it and to activate sections of it. There are infinite views of it. Our task is to get the right view, and by determined direction of our attention, make it pass in procession before the inner eye. If we assemble the right sequence and experience it in imagination until it has the tone of reality, then we consciously create circumstances. This inner procession is the activity of imagination that must be consciously directed. We, by a series of mental transformations, become aware of increasing portions of that which already is. And by matching our own mental activity to that portion of creation which we desire to experience, we activate it, resurrect it, and give it life. This experience of mine not only shows the world as a manifestation of the mental activity of the individual observer, but it also reveals our course of time as jumps of attention between eternal moments, An infinite abyss separates any two moments of ours. We, by the movements of our attention, give life to the sculptures of lost walls. Think of the world as containing an infinite number of states of consciousness from which it could be viewed. Think of these states as rooms or mansions in the house of God, and like the rooms of any house, they are fixed relative to one another. But think of yourself, the real self, the imaginative you, as the living, moving occupant of God's house. Each room contains some of Lotus' sculptures with infinite plots and dramas and situations already worked out, but not activated. They are activated as soon as human imagination enters and fuses with them. Each represents certain mental and emotional activities. To enter a state, man must consent to the ideas and feelings which it represents. These states represent an infinite number of possible mental transformations which man can experience. To move into another state or mansion necessitates a change of belief. All that you could ever desire is already present and only waits to be met by your belief. But it must be met, for that is the necessary condition by which alone it can be activated and objectified. Matching the beliefs of a state is the seeking that finds, the knocking to which it is open, the asking that receives. Go in and possess the land. The moment man matches the beliefs of any state, he fuses with it. And this union results in the activation and projection of its plots, plans, dramas, and situations. It becomes the individual's home from which he views the world. It is his workshop. And if he's observant, he will see outer reality shaping itself upon the model of his imagination. It is for this purpose of training us in image making that we were made subject to the limitations of the senses and clothed in bodies of flesh. It is the awakening of the imagination, the returning of his Son, that our Father waits for. The creature was made subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of him who subjected it. But the victory of the Son, the return of the prodigal, assures us that the creature shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the Son. We were subjected to this biological experience because no one can know of imagination who has not been subjected to the vanities and limitations of the flesh, who has not taken his share of sonship and gone prodigal, who has not experimented and tasted this cup of experience. And confusion will continue until man awakes and a fundamentally imaginative view of life has been reestablished and acknowledged as basic. I should preach the unsearchable riches of Christ and make all men see what is the fellowship of the mystery which from the beginning of the world has been hid in God, who created all things by Jesus Christ. Bear in mind that Christ in you is your imagination. As the appearance of our world is determined by the particular state with which we are fused, so may we determine our fate as individuals by fusing our imaginations with ideals we seek to realize. On the distinction between our states of consciousness depends the distinction between the circumstances and conditions of our life. Man who is free in his choice of state often cries out to be saved from the state of his choice. And he shall cry out in that day because of your king, which he shall have chosen you. And the Lord will not hear you in that day. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel. And they said, Nay, but we will have a king over us. Choose wisely the state that you will serve. All states are lifeless until imagination fuses with them. All things, when they're admitted, are made manifest by the light. For everything that is made manifest is light. And ye are the light of the world, by which those ideas to which you have consented are made manifest. Hold fast to your ideals. Nothing can take it from you but your imagination. Don't think of your ideal, think from it. It is only the ideals of which you think that are ever realized. Man lives not by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. And the mouth of God is the mind of man. Become a drinker and an eater of the ideals you wish to realize. Have a set, definite aim, or your mind will wander, and wandering it eats every negative suggestion. If you live right mentally, everything else will be right. By a change of mental diet, you can alter the course of observed events. But unless there is a change of mental diet, your personal history remains the same. You illuminate or darken your life by the ideas to which you consent. Nothing is more important to you than the ideas on which you feed. And you feed on the ideas from which you think. If you find the world unchanged, it is a sure sign that you are wanting infidelity to the new mental diet which you neglect in order to condemn your environment. You are in need of a new and sustained attitude. You can be anything you please if you will make the conception habitual, or any idea which excludes all others from the field of attention discharges in action. The ideas and moods to which you constantly return define the state with which you are fueled. Therefore, train yourself to occupy more frequently the feeling of your wish fulfilled. This is creative magic. It is the way to work toward fusion with the desired state. If you would assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled more frequently, you would be master of your fate. But unfortunately, you shut out your assumption for all but the occasional hour. Practice making real to yourself the feeling of the wish fulfilled. After you have assumed the feeling of the wish fulfilled, do not close the experience as you would a book, but carry it around like a fragrant odor. Instead of being completely forgotten, let it remain in the atmosphere, communicating its influence automatically to your actions and reactions. A mood often repeated gains a momentum that is hard to break or check, so be careful of the feelings you entertain. Habitual moods reveal the state with which you are fused. It is always possible to pass from thinking to the end you desire to realize to thinking from the end. But the crucial matter is thinking from the end. For thinking from means unification or fusion with the ideal. Whereas in thinking of the end, there is always subject and object. The thinking individual and the thing thought, you must imagine yourself into the state of your wish fulfilled, in your love for that state. And in so doing, live and think from it and know more of it. You pass from thinking of to thinking from by centering your imagination in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Chapter 8. The apple of God's eye. What think ye of the Christ? Whose son is he? When this question is asked of you, let your answer be, Christ is my imagination, and though I see not yet all things put under him, yet I know that I am Mary, from whom sooner or later he shall be born, and eventually do all things through Christ. The birth of Christ is the awakening of the inner or second man. It is becoming conscious of the mental activity within oneself, which activity continues whether we are conscious of it or not. The birth of Christ does not bring any person from a distance or make anything to be that was not there before. It is the unveiling of the Son of God in man. The Lord cometh in clouds is the prophet's description of the pulsating rings of golden liquid light on the head of him in whom he awaits. The coming is from within and not from without, as Christ is in us. This great mystery, God was manifest in the flesh, begins with Advent, and it is appropriate that the cleansing of the temple, which temple ye are, stands in the forefront of the Christian mysteries. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Advent is unveiling the mystery of your being. If you will practice the art of revision by a life lived according to the wise, imaginative use of your inner speech and inner actions in confidence that by the conscious use of the power that worketh in us, Christ will awake in you. If you believe it, trust it, act upon it, Christ will awaken you. This is Advent. Great is the mystery. God was manifest in the flesh. From Advent on, he that toucheth, you toucheth the apple of God's eye. Chapter 1, thinking fourth dimensionally. And now I have told you before it come to pass that when it is come to pass, ye might believe. Many persons, myself included, have observed events before they occurred. That is, before they occurred in this world of three dimensions. Since man can observe an event before it occurs in the three dimensions of space, life on earth must proceed according to plan. And this plan must exist elsewhere in another dimension and be slowly moving through our space. If the occurring events were not in this world when they were observed, then, to be perfectly logical, they must have been out of this world. And whatever is there to be seen before it occurs here must be predetermined from the point of view of man awake in a three-dimensional world. Thus the question arises, are we able to alter our future? My object in writing these pages is to indicate possibilities inherent in man, to show that man can alter his future. But thus altered, it forms again a deterministic sequence starting from the point of interference, a future that will be consistent with the alteration. The most remarkable feature of man's future is its flexibility. It is determined by his attitudes rather than by his acts. The cornerstone on which all things are based is man's concept of himself. He acts as he does and has the experiences that he does because his concept of himself is what it is and for no other reason. Had he a different concept of self, he would act differently. A change of concept of self automatically alters his future. And a change in any term of his future series of experiences reciprocally alters his concept of self. Man's assumptions, which he regards as insignificant, produce effects that are considerable. Therefore, man should revise his estimate of an assumption and recognize its creative power. All changes take place in consciousness. The future, although prepared in every detail in advance, has several outcomes. At every moment of our lives, we have before us the choice of which of several futures we will choose. There are two actual outlooks on the world possessed by everyone, a natural focus and a spiritual focus. The ancient teachers call the one the carnal mind, the other the mind of Christ. We may differentiate them as ordinary waking consciousness, governed by our senses, and a controlled imagination, governed by desire. We recognize these two distinct centers of thought in the statement. The natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, for they are spiritually discerned. The natural view confines reality to the moment, called now. To the natural view, the past and future are purely imaginary. The spiritual view, on the other hand, sees the contents of time. It sees events as distinct and separated as objects in space. The past and future are a present whole to the spiritual view. What is mental and subjective to the natural man is concrete and objective to the spiritual man. The habit of seeing only that which our senses permit renders us totally blind to what we otherwise could see. To cultivate the faculty of seeing the invisible, we should often deliberately disentangle our mind from the evidence of the senses and focus our attention on an invisible state, mentally feeling it and sensing it until it has all the distinctness of reality. Earnest, concentrated thought, focused in a particular direction, shuts out other sensations and causes them to disappear. We have but to concentrate on the state desired in order to see it. The habit of withdrawing attention from the region of sensation and concentrating it on the invisible develops our spiritual outlook and enables us to penetrate beyond the world of sense and to see that which is invisible. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen. This vision is completely independent of the natural faculties. Open it and quicken it. Without it, these instructions are useless, for the things of the Spirit are spiritually discerned. A little practice will convince us that we can, by controlling our imagination, reshape our future in harmony with our desire. Desire is the mainspring of action. We could not move a single finger unless we had a desire to move it. No matter what we do, we follow the desire which, at the moment, dominates our mind. When we break a habit, our desire to break it is greater than our desire to continue in the habit. The desires which impel us to action are those that hold our attention. A desire is but an awareness of something we lack or need to make our life more enjoyable. Desires always have some personal gain in view. The greater the anticipated gain, the more intense is the desire. There is no absolutely unselfish desire. Where there is nothing to gain, there is no desire, and consequently no action. The spiritual man speaks to the natural man through the language of desire. The key to progress in life and to the fulfillment of dreams lies in ready obedience to its voice. Unhesitating obedience to its voice is an immediate assumption of the wish fulfilled. To desire a state is to have it. As Pascal has said, you would not have sought me had you not already found me. Man, by assuming the feeling of his wish fulfilled and then living and acting on this conviction, alters the future in harmony with his assumption. Assumptions awaken what they affirm. As soon as man assumes the feeling of his wish fulfilled, his four-dimensional self finds ways for the attainment of this end, discovers methods for its realization. I know of no clearer definition of the means by which we realize our desires than to experience in imagination what we would experience in the flesh were we to achieve our goal. This experience of the end wills the means. With its larger outlook, the four-dimensional self then constructs the means necessary to realize the accepted end. The undisciplined mind finds it difficult to assume a state which is denied by the senses. Here is a technique that makes it easy to encounter events before they occur, to call things which are not seen as though they were. People have a habit of slighting the importance of simple things, but this simple formula for changing the future was discovered after years of searching and experimenting. The first step in changing the future is desire. That is, define your objective. Know definitely what you want. Secondly, construct an event which you believe you would encounter following the fulfillment of your desire. An event which implies fulfillment of your desire. Something that will have the action of self-predominance. Thirdly, immobilize the physical body and induce a condition akin to sleep. Lie on a bed or relax in a chair and imagine that you are sleeping. Then, with eyelids closed and your attention focused on the action you intend to experience in imagination. Mentally feel yourself right into the proposed action, imagining all the while that you are actually performing the action here and now. You must always participate in the imaginary action, not merely stand back and look on, but you must feel that you are actually performing the action, so that the imaginary sensation is real to you. It is important always to remember that the proposed action must be one which follows the fulfillment of your desire. And also, you must feel yourself into the action until it has all the vividness and distinctness of reality. For example, suppose you desired promotion in office. Being congratulated would be an event you would encounter following the fulfillment of your desire, having selected this action as the one you will experience in imagination. Immobilize the physical body and induce a state akin to sleep, a drowsy state, but one in which you are still able to control the direction of your thoughts, a state in which you are attentive without effort. Now imagine that a friend is standing before you. Put your imaginary hand into his. First, feel it to be solid and real, then carry on an imaginary conversation with him in harmony reaction. Do not visualize yourself at a distance in point of space and at a distance in point of time being congratulated on your good fortune. Instead, make elsewhere here and the future now. The future event is a reality now in a dimensionally larger world. And oddly enough, now in a dimensionally larger world is equivalent to here in the ordinary three-dimensional space of everyday life. The difference between feeling yourself in action here and now and visualizing yourself in action as though you were on a motion picture screen is the difference between success and failure. The difference will be appreciated if you will now visualize yourself climbing a ladder. Then, with eyelids closed, imagine that a ladder is right in front of you and feel you are actually climbing it. Desire, physical immobility, bordering on sleep, and imaginary action in which self-feeling predominates. Here and now are not only important factors in altering the future, but they are essential conditions in consciously projecting the spiritual self. If, when the physical body is immobilized, we become possessed of the idea to do something, and imagine that we are doing it here and now, and keep the imaginary action feelingly going right up until sleep ensues, we are likely to awaken out of the physical body to find ourselves in a dimensionally larger world with a dimensionally larger focus and actually doing what we desired and imagined we were doing in the flesh. But whether we awaken there or not, we are actually performing the action in the fourth dimensional world, and we will reenact it in the future, here in the third dimensional world. Experience has taught me to restrict the imaginary action, to condense the idea, which is to be the object of our meditation, into a single act, and to reenact it over and over again until it has the feeling of reality. Otherwise, the attention will wander off along an associational track, and hosts of associated images will be presented to our attention. In a few seconds, they will lead us hundreds of miles away from our objective in point of space and years away in point of time. If we decide to climb a particular flight of stairs, because that is the likely event to follow the realization of our desire, then we must restrict the action to climbing that particular flight of stairs. Should our attention wander off, we must bring it back to its task of climbing that flight of stairs and keep on doing so until the imaginary action has all the solidity and distinctness of reality. The idea must be maintained in the field of presentation without any sensible effort on our part. We must, with the minimum of effort, permeate the mind with the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Drowsiness facilitates change because it favors attention without effort, but it must not be pushed to the state of sleep, in which we shall no longer be able to control the movements of our attention, but rather a moderate degree of drowsiness, in which we are still able to direct our thought. A most effective way to embody a desire is to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and then, in a relaxed and sleepy state, repeat over and over again, like a lullaby, any short phrase which implies fulfillment of our desire, such as thank you, as though we addressed a higher power for having done it for us. If, however, we seek a conscious projection into a dimensionally larger world, then we must keep the action going right up until sleep ensues. Experience in imagination, with all the distinctness of reality, what would be experienced in the flesh were you to achieve your goal. And you shall, in time, meet it in the flesh as you met it in your imagination. Feed the mind with premises, that is, assertions presumed to be true, because assumptions, though unreal to the senses, if persisted in until they have the feeling of reality, will harden into fact. To an assumption, all means which promote its realization are good. It influences the behavior of all by inspiring in all the movements, the actions, and the words which tend towards its fulfillment. To understand how man molds his future in harmony with his assumption, we must know what we mean by a dimensionally larger world. For it is to a dimensionally larger world that we go to alter our future. The observation of an event before it occurs implies that the event is predetermined from the point of view of man in the three-dimensional world. Therefore, to change the conditions here in the three dimensions of space, we must first change them in the four dimensions of space. Man does not know exactly what is meant by a dimensionally larger world, and would no doubt deny the existence of a dimensionally larger self. He is quite familiar with the three dimensions of length, width, and height. And he feels that if there were a fourth dimension, it should be just as obvious to him as the dimensions of length, width, and height. A dimension is not a line. It is any way in which a thing can be measured that is entirely different from all other ways. That is, to measure a solid form. Dimensionally, we simply measure it in any direction except that of its length, width, and height. Is there another way of measuring an object other than those of its length, width, and height? Time measures my life without employing the three dimensions of length, width, and height. There is no such thing as an instantaneous object. Its appearance and disappearance are measurable. It endures for a definite length of time. We can measure its lifespan without using the dimensions of length, width, and height. Time is definitely a fourth way of measuring an object. The more dimensions an object has, the more substantial and real it becomes. A straight line which lies entirely in one dimension, acquires shape, mass, and substance by the addition of dimensions. What new quality would time, the fourth dimension, give which would make it just as vastly superior to solids as solids are to surfaces, and surfaces are to lines? Time is a medium for changes in experience because all changes take time. The new quality is changeability. Observe that if we bisect a solid, its cross-section will be a surface. By bisecting a surface, we obtain a line. And by bisecting a line, we get a point. This means that a point is but a cross-section of a line, which is, in turn, but a cross-section of surface, which is, in turn, but a cross-section of a solid, which is, in turn, if carried to its logical conclusion, but a cross-section of a four-dimensional object. We cannot avoid the inference that all three-dimensional objects are but cross-sections of four-dimensional bodies. Which means, when I meet you, I meet a cross-section of the four-dimensional you, the four-dimensional self. That is not seen. To see the four-dimensional self, I must see every cross-section or moment of your life from birth to death and see them all as coexisting. My focus should take in the entire array of sensory impressions which you have experienced on earth, plus those you might encounter. I should see them, not in the order in which they were experienced by you, but as a present whole, because change is the characteristic of the fourth dimension. I should see them in a state of flux as a living, animated whole. If we have all this clearly fixed in our mind, what does it mean to us in this three-dimensional world? It means that if we can move along time's length, we can see the future and alter it as we so desire. This world, which we think so solidly real, is a shadow out of which and beyond which we may at any time pass. It is an abstraction from a more fundamental and dimensionally larger world, a more fundamental world abstracted from a still more fundamental and dimensionally larger world, and so on to infinity. The absolute is unattainable by any means or analysis, no matter how many dimensions we add to the world. Man can prove the existence of a dimensionally larger world simply by focusing his attention on an invisible state and imagining that he sees and feels it. If he remains concentrated in this state, his present environment will pass away and he will awaken in a dimensionally larger world where the object of his contemplation will be seen as a concrete, objective reality. Intuitively, I feel that were he to abstract his thoughts from this dimensionally larger world and retreat still farther within his mind, he would again bring about an externalization of time. He would discover that every time he retreats into his inner mind and brings about an externalization of time, space becomes dimensionally larger. And he would therefore conclude that both time and space are serial, and that the drama of life is but the climbing of a multitudinous dimensional time block. Scientists will one day explain why there is a serial universe. But in practice, how we use this serial universe to change the future is more important. To change the future, we need only concern ourselves with two worlds in the infinite series: the world we know by reason of our bodily organs, and the world we perceive independently of our bodily organs. Chapter 2, Assumptions Become Facts. Men believe in the reality of the external world because they do not know how to focus and condense their powers to penetrate its thin crust. This book has only one purpose: the removing of the veil of the senses. that traveling into another world to remove the veil of the senses, we do not employ great effort. The objective world vanishes by turning our attention away from it. We have only to concentrate on the state desired in order to mentally see it, but to give it reality so that it will become an objective fact. We must focus attention upon the invisible state until it has the feeling of reality. When, through concentrated attention, our desire appears to possess the distinctness and feeling of reality, we have given it the right to become a visible, concrete fact. If it is difficult to control the direction of your attention while in a state akin to sleep, you may find gazing fixedly into an object very helpful. Do not look at its surface, but into and beyond any plane object, such as a wall, a carpet, or any other object which possesses depth. Arrange it to return as little reflection as possible. Imagine then that in this depth you are seeing and hearing what you want to see and hear until your attention is exclusively occupied by the imagined state. At the end of your meditation, when you awake from your controlled waking dream, you feel as though you had returned from a great distance. The visible world which you had shut out returns to consciousness, and by its very presence informs you that you have been self-deceived into believing that the object of your contemplation was real. But if you know that consciousness is the one and only reality, you will remain faithful to your vision, and by the sustained mental attitude confirm your gift of reality and prove that you have the power to give reality to your desires, that they may become visible, concrete facts. Define your ideal and concentrate your attention upon the idea of identifying yourself with your ideal. Assume the feeling of being it, the feeling that would be yours were you already the embodiment of your ideal. Then live and act upon this conviction. This assumption, though denied by the senses, if persisted in, will become fact. You will know when you have succeeded in fixing the desired state in consciousness by simply looking mentally at the people you know. In dialogues with yourself, you are less inhibited and more sincere than in actual conversations with others. Therefore, the opportunity for self-analysis arises when you are surprised by your mental conversations with others. If you see them as you formerly saw them, you have not changed your concept of self. For all changes of concepts of self result in a changed relationship to your world. In your meditation, allow others to see you as they would see you. You are this new concept of self, a concrete fact. You always seem to others an embodiment of the ideal you inspire. Therefore, in meditation, when you contemplate others, you must be seen by them mentally as you would be seen by them physically. Were your concept of self an objective fact? That is, in meditation, you imagine that they see you expressing that which you desire to be. If you assume that you are what you want to be, your desire is fulfilled, and in fulfillment, all longing is neutralized. You cannot continue desiring what you have already realized. Your desire is not something you labor to fulfill. It is recognizing something you already possess. It is assuming the feeling of being that which you desire to be. Believing and being are one. The conceiver and his conception are one. Therefore, that which you conceive yourself to be can never be so far off as even to be near. For nearness implies separation. If thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth. Being is the substance of things hoped, the evidence of things not yet seen. If you assume that you are what you want to be, then you will see others as they are related to your assumption. If, however, it is the good of others that you desire, then in meditation you must represent them to yourself as already being that which you desire them to be. It is through desire that you rise above your present sphere, and the road from longing to fulfillment is shortened as you experience in imagination what you would experience in the flesh, were you already the embodiment of the ideal you desire to be. I have stated that man has at every moment of time the choice before him which of several futures he will encounter. But the question arises, how is that possible when the experiences of man, awake in the three-dimensional world, are predetermined as its observation of an event before it occurs implies? This ability to change the future will be seen if we liken the experiences of life on earth to this printed page. Man experiences events on earth singly and successively in the same way that you are now experiencing the words of this page. Imagine that every word on this page represents a single sensory impression. To get the context, to understand my meaning, you focus your vision of the first word in the upper left-hand corner, and then move your focus across the page from left to right, letting it fall on the word singly and successively. By the time your eyes reach the last word on this page, you have extracted my meaning. Suppose, however, on looking at the page, with all the printed words thereon equally present, you decided to rearrange them. You could, by rearranging them, tell an entirely different story. In fact, you could tell many different stories. A dream is nothing more than uncontrolled, four-dimensional thinking, or the rearrangement of both past and future sensory impressions. Man seldom dreams of events in the order in which he experiences them when awake. He usually dreams of two or more events which are separated in time, fused into a single sensory impression. Or in his dream, he so completely rearranges his single waking sensory impressions that he does not recognize them when he encounters them in his waking state. For example, I dreamed that I delivered a package to the restaurant in my apartment building. The hostess said to me, "You can't have that there." Whereupon the elevator operator gave me a few letters, and as I thanked him for them, he in turn thanked me. At this point, the night elevator operator appeared and waved a greeting to me. The following day, as I left my apartment, I picked up a few letters which had been placed at my door. On my way down, I gave the day elevator operator a tip and thanked him for taking care of my mail. Whereupon he thanked me for the tip. On my return home that day, I overheard a doorman say to a delivery man, "You can't leave that there." As I was about to take the elevator up to my apartment, I was attracted by a familiar face in the restaurant. And as I looked in, the hostess greeted me with a smile. Late that night, I escorted my dinner guests to the elevator. And as I said goodbye to them, the night operator waved goodnight to me. By simply rearranging a few of the single sensory impressions I was destined to encounter, and by fusing two or more of them into single sensory impressions, I constructed a dream which differed quite a bit from my waking experience. When we have learned to control the movements of our attention in the four-dimensional world, we shall be able to consciously create circumstances in the three-dimensional world. We learn this control through the waking dream, where our attention can be maintained without effort. For attention minus effort is indispensable to changing the future. We can, in a controlled waking dream, consciously construct an event which we desire to experience in the three-dimensional world. The sensory impressions we use to construct our waking dream are present realities, displaced in time, or the four-dimensional world. All that we do in constructing the waking dream is to select from the vast array of sensory impressions those which, when they are properly arranged, imply that we have realized our desire. With the dream clearly defined, we relax in a chair and induce a state of consciousness akin to sleep, a state which, although bordering on sleep, leaves us in conscious control of the movements of our attention. When we've achieved that state, we experience in imagination what we would experience in reality were this waking dream an objective fact. In applying this technique to change the future, it is important always to remember that the only thing which occupies the mind during the waking dream is the waking dream, the predetermined action which implies the fulfillment of our desire. How the waking dream becomes physical fact is not our concern. Our acceptance of the waking dream as physical reality wills the means for its fulfillment. Let me again lay the foundation of changing the future, which is nothing more than a controlled waking dream. Define your objective. Know definitely what you want. Construct an event which you believe you will encounter following the fulfillment of your desire. Something which will have the action of self predominant. An event which implies the fulfillment of your desire. Immobilize the physical body and induce a state of consciousness akin to sleep. Then mentally feel yourself right into the proposed action, imagining all the while that you are actually performing the action here and now, so that you experience in imagination what you would experience in the flesh were you now to realize your goal. Experience has convinced me that this is the perfect way to achieve my goal. However, my own many failures would convict me were I to imply that I have completely mastered the movements of my attention. I can, however, with the ancient teachers say, this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind, and reaching forth unto those things which are before, I press toward the mark for the prize. Chapter 3, Power of Imagination. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Men claim that a true judgment must conform to the external reality to which it relates. This means that if I, while in prison, suggest to myself that I am free and succeed in believing that I am free, it is true that I believe in my freedom. But it does not follow that I am free, for I may be the victim of illusion. But because of my own experiences, I have come to believe in so many strange things that I see little reason to doubt the truth of things that are beyond my experience. The ancient teachers warned us not to judge from appearances because, said they, the truth need not conform to the external reality to which it relates. They claim that we bore false witness if we imagine evil against another. That no matter how real our belief appears to be, how truly it conforms to the external reality to which it relates, if it does not make free the one of whom we hold the belief, it is untrue and therefore a false judgment. We are called upon to deny the evidence of our senses and to imagine as true of our neighbor that which makes him free. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. To know the truth of our neighbor, we must assume that he is already that which he desires to be. Any concept we hold of another that is short of his fulfilled desire will not make him free, and therefore cannot be the truth. Instead of learning my craft in schools where attending courses and seminars is considered a substitute for self-acquired knowledge, my schooling was devoted almost exclusively to the power of imagination. I stayed for hours imagining myself to be other than that which my reason and my senses dictated, until the imagined states were vivid as reality. So vivid at Paso, I became but a part of my imagination and acted as I would have them. By the power of imagination, my fantasy led theirs and dictated to them their behavior, and the behavior and the discourse they held together while I was identified with my imagined state. Man's imagination is the man himself, and the world as imagination sees it is the real world. But it is our duty to imagine all that is lovely and of good report. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth. For man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. In meditation, when the brain grows luminous, I find my imagination endowed with a magnetic power to attract to me whatsoever I desire. Desire is the power imagination uses to fashion life about me as I fashion it within myself. I first desire to see a certain person or scene, and then I look at, though I was seeing that which I want to see, and the imagined state becomes objectively real. I desire to hear, and then I listen as though I were hearing, and the imagined voice speaks that which I dictate, as though it had initiated the message. I could give you many examples to prove my arguments, to prove that these imagined states do become physical reality. But I know that my examples will awaken in all who have not met the like, or who are not inclined towards my arguments, a most natural incredulity. Nevertheless, experience has convinced me of the truth of the statement. He calleth those things which be not as though they were. For I have, in intense meditation, called things that were not seen as though they were. And the unseen not only became seen, but eventually became physical realities. By this method, first desiring and then imagining that we are experiencing that which we desire to experience, we can mold the future in harmony with our desire. But let us follow the advice of the prophet and think only the lovely and the good, for the imagination waits on us as indifferently and as swiftly when our nature is evil as when it is good. From us spring forth good and evil. I have set before thee this day life and good and death and evil. Desire and imagination are the enchanter's wand of fable, and they draw to themselves their own affinity. They break forth best when the mind is in a state akin to sleep. I have written with some care and detail the method I choose to enter the dimensionally larger world, but I shall give one more formula for opening the door of the larger world. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falleth upon men, in slumberings upon the bed, then he openeth the ears of men, and sealeth their instruction. In dreams, we are usually the servant of our vision, rather than its master. But the internal fantasy of dream can be turned into an external reality. In dream, as in mediation, we slip from this world into a dimensionally larger world. And I know that the forms in dream are not flat, two-dimensional images which modern psychologists believe them to be. They are substantial realities of the dimensionally larger world, and I can lay hold of them. I have discovered that if I surprise myself dreaming, I can lay hold of any inanimate or stationary form of dreaming. A chair, a table, a stairway, a tree, and command to awake while firmly holding on the object of the dream. I am pulled through myself with the distinct feeling of awakening from dream. I awaken in another sphere, holding the object of my dream, to find that I am no longer the servant of my vision, but its master, for I am fully conscious and in control of the movements of my attention. It is in this fully conscious state, when we are in control of the direction of thought, that we call things that are not seen as though they were. In this state, we call things by wishing and assuming the feeling of our wish fulfilled. Unlike the world of three dimensions, where there is an interval between our assumption and its fulfillment, in the dimensionally larger world, there is an immediate realization of our assumption. The external reality instantly mirrors our assumption. Here, there is no need to wait 4 months till harvest. We look again as though we saw, and lo and behold, the fields are already white to harvest. In this dimensionally larger world, you shall not need to fight. Set yourselves, stand ye still, and see the salvation of the Lord with you. And because that greater world is slowly passing through our three-dimensional world, we can, by the power of imagination, mold our world in harmony with our desire. Look as though you saw. Listen as though you heard. Stretch forth your imaginary hand as though you touched, and your assumptions will harden into fact. So those who believe that a true judgment must conform to the external reality to which it relates, this will be foolishness and a stumbling block. But I preach and practice the fixing in consciousness of that which man desires to realize. Experience convinces me that fixed attitudes of mind which do not conform to the external reality to which they relate, and are therefore called imaginary. Things which are not will nevertheless bring to naught things that are. I do not wish to write a book of wonders, but rather to turn man's mind back to the one and only reality that the ancient teachers worshipped as God. All that was said of God was in reality, said of man's consciousness. So we may say that, according as it is written, he that glorieth, let him glory in his own consciousness. But let him that glorieth glory in this, that he understandeth and knoweth me, that I am the Lord which exercise loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. No man needs help to direct him in the application of this law of consciousness. I am is the self-definition of the absolute, the root out of which everything grows. I am the vine. What is your answer to the eternal question? Who am I? Your answer determines the part you play in the world's drama. Your answer, that is, your concept of self, need not conform to the external reality to which it relates. This great truth is revealed in the statements. Let the weak say, I am strong. Look back over the good resolutions with which many past New Years are encumbered. They lived a little while and then they died. Why? Because they were severed from their root. Assume that you are that which you want to be. Experience in imagination what you would experience in the flesh were you already that which you want to be. Remain faithful to your assumption so that you define yourself as that which you have assumed. Things have no life if they are severed from their roots, and our consciousness, our I amness, is the root of all that springs in our world. If we believe not that I am he, ye shall die in your sins. That is, if I do not believe that I am already that which I desire to be, then I remain as I am and die in my present concept of self. There is no power outside of the consciousness of man to resurrect and make alive that which man desires to experience. That man who is accustomed to call up at will whatever images he pleases will be, by virtue of the power of his imagination, master of his fate. I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. He shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Chapter 4. No one to change but self. And for their sakes I sanctify myself, that they also might be sanctified through the truth. The ideal we serve and strive to attain could never be evolved from us, were it not potentially involved in our nature. It is now my purpose to retell and to emphasize an experience of mine, printed by me 2 years ago. I believe these quotations from the search will help us to understand the operation of the law of consciousness and show us that we have no one to change but self. Once in idle intervals at sea, I meditated on the perfect state and wondered what I would be were I of too pure eyes to behold inequity, if to me all things were pure and were I without condemnation. As I became lost in this fiery brooding, I found myself lifted above the dark environment of the senses. So intense was feeling, I felt myself a being of fire dwelling in a body of air, voices as from a heavenly chorus, with the exaltation of those who had been conquerors in a conflict with death, were singing, He is risen, He is risen. And intuitively, I knew they meant me. Then I seemed to be walking in the night. I soon came upon a scene that might have been the ancient pool of Bethesda, for in this place lay a great multitude of impotent folk, blind, halt withered, waiting not for the moving of the water as of tradition, but waiting for me. As I came near, without thought or effort on my part, they were, one after the other, molded as by the magician of the beautiful, eyes, hands, feet, all missing members, were drawn from some invisible reservoir and molded in harmony with that perfection which I felt springing within me. When all were made perfect, the chorus exulted, It is finished. Then the scene dissolved and I awoke. I know the vision was the result of my intense meditation upon the idea of perfection. For my meditations invariably bring about union with the state contemplated. I had been so completely absorbed within the idea that for a while I had become what I contemplated, and the high purpose with which I had for that moment identified myself drew the companionship of high things and fashioned the vision in harmony with my inner nature. The ideal with which we are united works by association of ideals to awaken 1,000 moods, to create a drama in keeping with the central ideal. My mystical experiences have convinced me that there is no way to bring about the outer perfection we seek other than by the transformation of ourselves. In the divine economy, nothing is lost. We cannot lose anything save by descent from the sphere where the thing has its natural life. There is no transforming power in death, and whether we are here or there, we fashion the world that surrounds us by the intensity of our imagination and feeling. And we illuminate or darken our lives by the concepts we hold of ourselves. Nothing is more important to us than our conception of ourselves. And especially is this true of our concept of the dimensionally great one within us. Those who help or hinder us, whether they know it or not, are the servants of that law which shapes outward circumstances in harmony with our inner nature. It is our conception of ourselves which frees or constrains us, though it may use material agencies to achieve its purpose. Because life molds the outer world to reflect the inner arrangement of our minds, there is no way of bringing about the outer perfection we seek other than by the transformation of ourselves. No help cometh from without. The hills to which we lift our eyes are those of an inner reign. It is thus to our own consciousness that we must turn as to the only reality, the only foundation on which all phenomena can be explained. We can rely absolutely on the justice of this law to give us only that which is of the nature of ourselves. To attempt to change the world before we change our concept of ourselves is to struggle against the nature of things. There can be no outer change until there is first an inner change, as within, so without. I am not advocating philosophical indifference when I suggest that we should imagine ourselves as already that which we want to be, living in a mental atmosphere of greatness rather than using physical means and arguments to bring about the desired change. Everything we do, unaccompanied by a change of consciousness, is but futile readjustment of surfaces. However we toil or struggle, we can receive no more than our assumptions affirm. To protest against anything which happens to us is to protest against the law of our being and our rulership over our own destiny. The circumstances of my life are too closely related to my conception of myself not to have been formed by my own spirit from some dimensionally larger storehouse of my being. If there is pain to me in these happenings, I should look within myself for the cause, for I am moved here and there and made to live in a world in harmony with my concept of myself. Intense meditation brings about a union with the state contemplated. And during this union, we see vision of experiences and behave in keeping with our change of consciousness. This shows us that a transformation of consciousness will result in a change of environment and behavior. All laws prove that violent emotions are extremely potent in precipitating mental rearrangements. Every great conflict has been followed by an era of materialism and greed, in which the ideals for which the conflict ostensibly were waged are submerged. This is inevitable because war evokes hate, which impels a descent in consciousness from the plane of the ideal to the level where the conflict is waged. If we could become as emotionally aroused over our ideals as we become over our dislike, we would ascend to the plane of our ideal as easily as we now descend to the level of our hate. Love and hate have a magical transforming power, and we grow through their exercise into the likeness of what we contemplate. By intensity of hatred, we create in ourselves the character we imagine in our enemy. Qualities die for want of attention. So the unlovely states might best be rubbed out by imaging beauty for ashes and joy for mourning, rather than by direct attacks on the state from which we would be free. Whatsoever things are lovely and of good report, think on these things, for we become that with which we are en rapport. There is nothing to change but our concept of self. As soon as we succeed in transforming self, our world will dissolve and reshape itself in harmony with that which our change affirms.